Boy, oh boy, it's been a minute, and I really wanted to make this video, but some of you may have seen that I've been on Netflix. Yeah, that was me. But I really want to make this video. I'm here in this lovely hotel, and I scripted this video probably about a month ago. I just haven't had the time to shoot because I've been on Netflix doing other stuff. I've been on a side mission. I want to talk about the black dating myth, and specifically why black men actually do date black women and what the data really says. Because if you have spent any time on social media, probably have seen the narrative that, you know, black men don't date black women. I've heard it a million times. People even accuse me of it, even though if you look at my dating history, it's probably been about 75% dark-skinned women with a few mixed-race girls in there. But, you know, it's something that a lot of black men have to deal with. And sometimes I find black men having to try and prove themselves. But a lot of it is driven by like a lot of emotion when I see people talk about it. And no one talks about it logically. No one talks about, you know, why is it that way? No one talks about the dynamics. And obviously, you know, we live in a world where no one really cares about men, which is fine, you know, but specifically black men. The opinions of black men are probably the most looked down upon. Not out of everybody, but out of a lot of people. So I want to talk about what's really happening. Obviously, I've got some notes with quite a lot of data, and I'm going to spit the data at you. But I think more important than just giving you the data is also giving you the nuance behind the data, because that's the most important factor. Because I can tell you data, I can tell you, you know, this percentage and that percentage, but that doesn't really matter. So when we actually scroll past celebrity topics and we look at what's happening in the real world, it tells a different story. So let me get into it. So the belief that I hear a lot is obviously that black men do not date black women. Yeah, that's a fair, common kind of soundbite or judgment that people make. But if we look at data from both the US and the UK, that would send a completely different story. And here's why. 86% of black men are married to black women. And in the UK, 78% of black African men are married to black women. And yeah, the Caribbean brothers have let us down a little bit here, with only 57% of black Caribbean men married to black women. Now, when I read that, I thought that is such a big difference in the UK between black Caribbean men and black African men. And I think it's something to do with obviously how long we've been in the country. So I'm a Jamaican man, and a lot of our grandparents or our parents, you know, they came here in the 60s. They've been here before West Africans came here, before the Nigerians, before the Ghanaians. So we've been in this country. So we've probably assimilated more into British culture than the other races, which probably, and I'm saying probably, kind of ties into that. Also, colonialism, black Jamaican people would have probably been around more white people, even back in Jamaica, compared to maybe West Africans, right? So I think that definitely plays a part, and that kind of, I can't say it for sure, you know, you can do as much reading as you want, but I definitely believe that plays a part. So overall, in its totality, the majority of black men do date black women. But then that leads me to another question. If the data tells us that majority of black men do marry or date black women, why do we feel like that's not the case? Or why do people say it's not the case? And I have two kind of, not theories, but ideas behind this. One of them being that although black men date and marry majority their own race, there is a caveat to that, because black men also date outside their race the most. So when you line up black men with either Indian men, white men, South American men, whatever it may be, we are the one race of men that date outside of our race the most, right? Comparatively to other men, right? And that's probably why so many people say that, because when you look at the data, although in terms of marriage statistics, we date within our race, there are a lot of us who also date outside of our race a lot. And I think that gets missed in the argument, okay? Because everyone says, oh, you know, black men don't date black women. Well, that's not true. What you're really trying to say, or what I'm really hearing when I hear that now, is that yes, black men will marry black women, and they do in the majority, but black men are also the most likely to date outside of their race. That doesn't mean that we only date outside of our race, or that doesn't mean that we date outside our race in disproportionate numbers. We do it more than our white brothers or Asian brothers, so on and so forth. But here's the thing that makes it more interesting, and that makes the message a bit more amplified, and it is celebrities and successful men. You know, there's kind of a narrative that, you know, successful black men leave black women. Yeah, I've heard that many times. And if we look at a lot of successful black men, majority of the times, you probably won't see them with a black woman. And I always see this in sports. Obviously, I come from a sports background. So if we're talking about football in the UK, for instance, you see a lot of black athletes. They don't date women with the same skin tone as them. You will see it in America as well, but I think America a lot less. So it does leave you with questions, and it does make you think, what is there something to do with success that means I can't have another dark-skinned woman on my arm? Maybe that might be the case. And some interesting statistics is, you know, only 7% of married black men are married with white wives, and the other 7% are other races. in the US, obviously. And among college educated, or in the UK, we'd say university educated, 79% marry black women. So, the viral headlines and some of the stuff that we see online about, black men leaving black women, Kanye West has got that famous verse that we all know in that Gold Digger song. I think because it's so visible, we think that it's more common. It's amplified because of that. And I can understand that. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it. But I do think there is a element where I think that, especially for athletes, and I can't say this for people that, famous rappers or whatever, but I do know that for athletes, there is an aspect there where they got to fit in. They want to be accepted. They want their partners to be desirable. And this is where we kind of get into touchy territory. But if we look at the data from dating apps, we know that black women tend to be the lowest in terms of desirability based on app data. That doesn't mean that they're not desirable. Black women are beautiful, of course. But in terms of app data, that's kind of what we see. So we can assume that common consensus that a lot of men that circulate in these powerful circles or these famous circles, these influencer groups, these athletes, they probably don't view black women as necessarily beautiful, right? Whether that's fair or not, I don't think it's fair, but that's just the world that we live in, unfortunately. Now, because of that, a lot of people are trying to save image, they're trying to save face, and they want to be, the guy with the beautiful girl on their arm, but society doesn't view black women as beautiful as some of these other races. So therefore, even if they want to be with a black woman, they may choose not to do so because they want to be seen as the guy. Now, is that right? Of course, that is not right. And that just kind of shows you sometimes a lot of these black athletes and so on and so forth, they just ain't got a backbone. You can call them sellouts, whatever you want to call them. I'm not on the Dr. Umar thing, but, that plays a part, right? So we have to kind of look at it in multiple layers. And I'm someone that I want to try and avoid kind of making blanket statements or, celebrities are celebrities. And one thing I hate is when we kind of use the lens of a celebrity as if it paints the whole world this way, because, we're all different. And there's only a select, amount of celebrities and superstars. And then there's just everybody else and there's normal people, right? So, a lot of the stuff that we see in celebrities is not replicated in our day-to-day lives because they are the exception and not the rule. We can't use people that are the exception and not the rule to then fuel our arguments. It's not really fair. Now, the next thing that we have to kind of look at is, and this is where I have strong opinions on this, is the colorism factor of it. Because I think that is like the one thing that does affect black dating. Because here's the argument that people say to me. I'll say to a girl, look, I don't really like wigs, right? I'm not a wig man. I don't like weave wigs. I don't mind like braids, like braid extensions, but I'm not like a wig person. That's my personal preference, right? And then if I say I like natural hair, they'll be like, oh, but what type of natural hair? When I've dated bald girls, I've dated girls with, can shape up and level 2 like me. Well, I used to have that. I've dated all types, right? They'll be like, no, but what type you want? You mean like that curly, kinky, light skin hair? I'm like, nah, man, I'm a dark skinned man. I don't mind. You can have it afro. I don't care. I don't care if it's 4C. I don't care. I like it when I can feel your roots. That's me personally. So when I hear that, we're going down the colorism territory. And I agree that there are men that when they say they like natural hair, we're talking about a certain type of natural hair. And I totally know that there are fellas like that, and that's fine. And also when we look at the black dating statistics, one thing it doesn't caveat for is, okay, now we get into the territory of what shade of black. Now, there's black like me black, there's black like my table that I'm sitting on right here. There's slightly different shades of black, right? And the reality is that darker skinned women find it harder, right? And most men will go for a lighter or brown skinned woman. And we don't know, out of the 86% of black men that are married to black women, how many of those are actually like dark skinned black women. Now, I don't like to get into the semantics of, light skin, dark skin, but I do recognize and I do believe that it does play a role. There is pretty privilege in the world. I think that black women that are dark skinned versus brown or light skinned, they obviously get treated very differently. You can't deny it. I don't deny it because I know it's real. I've got black sisters. All my sisters are black. So I know exactly that. I know it's real is what I'm trying to say here. And I think that, and that part, I think people are very, very aware of that. There is a lot of colorism that is within our culture and within us as people, whether that's in the UK, the US, even in Africa, there is colorism. Even in the Caribbean, there is colorism. And we know that. And I think women bear the brunt of it more than men do, because dark-skinned men versus light-skinned men, that could be a video topic maybe for another day. But I think we have a different dynamic between us, whereas light-skinned women versus dark-skinned women, or brown-skinned women versus light-skinned women, there's a different relationship that I feel like they have between each other. Like, I know people that have full-blown arguments about this. And one of the things that plays a big part in this colorism thing is obviously, especially for those of us that live in Western societies, we are heavily plagued with Eurocentric ideas of beauty, from how our nose should be to how our lips should be to how our hair should be to even our body shapes. So I understand that a lot of that does influence young men and young boys, and specifically black men, because, we're socialized the same way that all the other men are, regardless of race. We still have the same element of socialization. Obviously, culturally, things may be different from a white household to a black household. But regardless of that, when we look at how much media we consume, it's likely that we are consuming a lot of Eurocentric ideas of beauty are being kind of fed to us from a young age. You look at magazines, you look at TV, so on and so forth. So, what you will find is that a lot of dark-skinned women are often overlooked. They're often rejected. And when we look at the matchmaking data in those apps, like I said previously, they tend to be the least desirable on paper, obviously. I think right now, we know that colorism keeps black women sidelined. But then I think to myself, how are black women actually dating today? And what about the other side of things, like black women dating white men? I don't think that gets talked about a lot. And the reason that is because it just doesn't happen as often. And I spoke to a lot of women, and I speak to a lot of women who say, the idea of dating outside their race, it's not comfortable for them. They don't know if they'll be accepted. I think black men are more willing to go through not being accepted by someone's family or whatever, versus for a woman, I think that's a lot harder. Personally, that's just my opinion on that. But there are women that will do it. They may not be happy doing it, but they will do it. That leads me to another thing. The truth is, black women are more loyal to black men. I mean that actually, when I think about it on a personal level, they are definitely more loyal. Here's a bit of data for you. 12% of black women marry outside their race versus 24% of black men. If we compare that to the other races of women, about 36% of Asian women and 28% of Latina women date outside their race, right? So that's US statistics. Unfortunately, this particular data, I could not find anything in the UK that would represent it. But what it does tell us is that basically black women choose to stay within their race as much as possible compared to the men. And I think that there's a bit of a pressure. I definitely think that a lot of women, and I think black people in general, you kind of grow up and they're like, let's keep it in the family. I know that a lot of Asian communities have that as well, where it's like, and I think for women, there's more pressure on that. I also think that there's an element of you want your babies to look like you. And this may be a bit of a controversial thing to say, but I'm not really too fussed about controversy. But I think some people, when they're having kids or when they envision themselves having children, they're like, I want my babies to look like me. And obviously, if they're a different race, they're not going to look like you per se, or a different color. So I think that plays a role, maybe tiny bit, definitely for sure. And I think as well as black women dating outside of their race a lot less compared to other races of women, that also ties back into the desirability factor that obviously, according to dating apps, because it's only on dating apps. Obviously, it might be in real life, but then I talk to a lot of black women in real life and they get approached too. But in dating apps, they are probably the least desired. So it's like a double effect. They don't want to date outside their race, plus they're not wanted by other races as much. So it's like two layers to it, right? Their dating options are narrowed to just black men most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. And then that leads me to one other thing. Black women being fetishized. I can't get the words out. But a lot of black women face, becoming a fetish for some races. And sometimes black women find it difficult to decipher, is this a fetish or do you actually like me? Do you want to be with me? Are you genuine in pursuing this, or are you fetishizing me? And I know that I've definitely been fetishized. Definitely had that as a black man from other races. I couldn't imagine what that feels as a woman, but I know it happens. So I know it's real. With that being said, the last real aspect here is the battle that black women face from media representation standpoint. We've all heard about the angry black woman trope. And for me, I know it's a narrative that we continue to talk about and try to fight against, but it's probably the most unfair narrative because most of the black women I know in my life are pretty soft, friendly, nerdy black women, super intelligent black women, but there's also aggressive black women. But I guarantee if you went to Mexico and you spoke to Mexican women, there are soft, nerdy, super aggressive and loud Mexican women. There are some very soft, nerdy and aggressive white women. There are the same aspects in all races. So I never really understood the angry black woman thing, or why that's become such a thing in the media, why that gets portrayed all the time. It's such a typical trope that I think sometimes women have to teeter along this fine line of I don't want to come across as this aggressive black woman, because they're so used to being stereotyped and pigeonholed in that way. Whereas when we look at other races, they don't have to battle with that mentally as much. And it's not fair. But again, that affects the desirability of black women. Because I remember, I'll never forget this. I lived in America for 4 years and there's a Turkish guy, one of my teammates. And, as men, we have these debates in football changing rooms and stuff. And, we're talking about black women. And I was like, oh, so you are saying to him, so do you date black women? And he was like, no, they're too aggressive. And I was like, they're too aggressive. So white women not aggressive. And he's like, yeah, they are. But I don't know, black women, they're just they're so much harsher. I'm like, what do you mean? How are they harsher? Because, you can't just say they're harsher without giving me a reason why. And he's just like, no, the way they talk to you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. Have you actually had that experience, or is it what you've seen? He's like, I never dated one. It's just, it's what you see. I'm like, oh, okay. So another issue, especially in the Black community, is our culture. What gets the most visibility in our culture is always the most negative. I also think that plays a role. It's unfortunate, but that plays a role, because the visibility of the nerdy, soft Black girl versus the loud, the ratchet, the bad B type of girl, the ones that should be getting the love ain't getting the love. It's like rap music, right? The nerdy, smart, conscious, intelligent Black women that rap are nowhere near as big as the, what I'm trying to say. And I'm not pitting this group against that group. But what I am saying is that there's no balance. And it's so imbalanced that, other people, other races think that this is the culture and this bad side is all we've got. And that's where, again, more problems lie. That's a deeper conversation. We could talk about media representation in depth in another video, but I'm here just to kind of lay out what I think is happening here when we talk about this, because I've had real life experiences where I ask men like, yo, why don't you date Black women? And they'll give me some silly answer. Or, I've had to not disown friends, but I realize, you could never be my boy because you're a bit of a coon the way that you talk about Black women, right? And I always think when I listen to someone talk about Black women, I got to remember that I got sisters. And if someone says something mad about my sister, I like to fight, innit? So I'd get it cracking if I had to. Obviously, I wouldn't do that, but if I needed to, I would. And that's why I've got to be careful with who I spend my time with. And I got to make sure, even if you don't like Black women, because no one's forcing you to like Black women, I don't think you have to. I think what's more important is that we help people understand that, everything you've been socialized to believe is not quite accurate. Have you actually sat down and spent time with a Black woman? Have you tried to even approach one? You're just doing it based on what you've seen on the media. But anyway, I don't want to go too far off the topic here, which is supposed to be about Black women dating Black men, which we know actually happens in its droves. So the narrative that, Black men don't date Black women is actually false, because Black love is strong. And it's kind of, I think it's been overshadowed by systemic bias and distorted storytelling and people in podcasts giving hot takes, which is just not accurate. If we look at even some superstars, Denzel Washington, if we look at LeBron James, Didier Drogba, yeah? And it's kind of sad that I can't think of as many as I'd like to, but a lot of these celebrities are with Black women. It's just we don't see it as frequently. So we can't look at celebrities as our kind of pinnacle, because that doesn't represent society. And I think it's unfair to just say, okay, these guys date Black women, these guys don't. Like, it's just not fair, because the majority of Black men are still dating Black women, or they're marrying Black women. There are nuances to that data. There are definitely a lot of nuances to that data, as I've tried to explain and explore. But we have to say the facts are the facts. What people need to start saying is, it's not true that Black men don't date Black women. What is true is that Black men date outside their race more than other races comparatively. That is much more of an accurate statement. And that's what we kind of need to talk about maybe a bit more and address. Why is that happening per se? I have very deep thoughts about that one, and that's going to be a whole video in itself. But this was more just to float out the idea of like, is it true? Why do people say this? And what can we do about it? So yeah, data across the UK and the US show that, Black men are choosing Black partners. And the reality is that I think that it's more to do with the Black men that are choosing to date outside the race that are skewing the numbers. But yeah, Black love isn't failing. It's probably being drowned out by the noise, but the numbers don't lie. And really, what we need to be doing is building and rebuilding the relationship between Black men and women in both the UK and the US. And rather than sitting on social media and podcasts and tearing each other down, we should be thinking about strategies and ways to build each other back up, because home is where the heart is. And there are some cultural things that we share together that no other race will understand. I'm not saying that you should not date outside your race, but for those of you that, for the men that ever go out there and say, I don't date Black women, and you're Black, that don't sit right with me. That don't sit right with me. But anyway, what I would love to know, because I took a hiatus on this channel, obviously, for those of you that watch Netflix, you've probably seen my face. I want to get back on the train of making videos. I've got obviously all these videos I scripted before I went on this show. So for me, I want to talk about all these topics that I've got, specifically around Black people, Black issues, Black men. I've had to take a bit of a pause on writing my book, but I'm going to keep writing it. But I'd love to know in the comments, what kind of topics should I dive into a bit more? I'm really going to try and be aggressive with this channel this year. I think for the next 2 years, just to have fun with it. I'm not putting any pressure on myself to try and get this channel to like 1 million views or whatever. I don't really care. It's more just a side project, passion project, something to do for fun, downtime, sit there, make videos. So yeah, but let's talk, man. Leave a comment. Let me know. I want to discuss way more topics, deeper topics that I can really get my teeth into and do more research and put together like really strong, compelling ideas. And sometimes I relay the data, but deep down, I want to give my opinion as well. So it's more about giving me an opportunity to discuss data and then analyze why is the data this way. Because one thing about when you read statistics and you read studies and some people read studies and they go straight to the conclusion, they don't even look how the study was done, whatever it may be. What we really want to do is like, okay, this is the reality, but how do we get to this reality? And why are we at this reality? And what do we need to do to change that reality? And that is what I like to talk about. All right. Peace.